Hi, good afternoon to the Milner Browne webinar on SAP Business One for manufacturing firms. My name is Ian Bate. I work in the marketing department for Milner Browne. My colleague Douglas McDove is also on the line. Douglas is one of our senior consultants at Milner Browne, and he will be giving you a guided tour of SAP Business One this afternoon. He would like to show you obviously all the basic functions of the solution and how everything works. So if you do have any questions or if you'd like to find out anything more about SAP Business One, or if you would like to see anything in particular working in the solution, you have there's a questions tab on the right hand side that you are more than welcome to send through any questions or inquiries, and Douglas will address all of those once the presentation has finished. The broadcast is live, so if there are any technical difficulties with the software, please bear with us. If you have any issues with the sound or the visuals, please let us know, and we will try and address those straight away. Douglas, are you there?
I am, yes. Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, Douglas. As I mentioned a moment ago, you're going to give a very high-level overview of the solution this afternoon. So I will pass over the presenter details to yourself, and it is all yours, Douglas.
Okay, as Ian's just mentioned, what I intend to do today is give you a brief overview of Business One's stock control and production. That's, I think, the main areas of interest. However, there are obviously people there who maybe haven't had any exposure to Business One at all. So I'll start with some more general aspects of Business One, just to give you an idea of how it works and the look and feel. So on the screen at the moment, you should be able to see Business One screen. If I click this button here, the modules will appear. And this is a kind of traditional style of ERP system menu where you can see various modules, and you click on the modules, open them up, and you see different functions within the modules. Although you're looking at one particular style, these days there are different types of interfaces to Business One. You can see in the center of the screen, in fact, different one. This is, in fact, a very, very simplified version of the cockpit where I'm able to do things like drag in common functions. So if you're creating your own little menu and such like, there are a number of other widgets, they're called, to make up the cockpit. However, cockpit's it's a different topic. We'll just leave it. We'll leave that for the moment. It's just so that you're aware of what you're looking at. There's another interface, that's a kind of more traditional interface that if you saw Business One from a few years ago, you might be more familiar with. That's, again, same basic principle, modules down the left-hand side. So, if we move on to actually using the software, if we click on the sales module, for instance, let's take as an example just some selling. Most businesses sell products or services, so I'll very quickly put on a sales order just to let you see it happen. Okay. Okay, so that is very quickly, I just added a sales order for a printer, as you can see it on the screen. So I'll just do that again slightly more slowly, just to point out a few of the things that were happening. So if I go back to adding a new sales order, I'm going to replicate what I just did. So I started typing the customer's name. You can see there that Business One is making a suggestion to who the customer might be. If I I can then take that and it's quickly filled in. You can see there, you don't need to remember codes, you just need a bit of the name. The system will help you out. Same kind of idea here. If I start typing a product code, you'll see that Business One is going to make some suggestions as to what that product might be, and I can pick it from the suggestions. I can also type in parts of codes, I can click on lookups and so on. It's all quite straightforward. Okay, and if I bring back, there's the sales order I did put on. Another thing that you might notice is you'll see on the screens there are little golden arrows all over the place. Now in Business One, that shows that you're able to drill down into some lower level of detail. So if we take, for example, there's the item number, the product code. If I click on that, I open up the item master data where I can see the definition of this item and a whole load of other settings, some of which we'll look at in a bit more detail later when we start looking at the stock side and some production side of things. Also, there's one against the customer code. If I click on that, again, it's going to open up the customer master record in this case with the customer details. You'll see on this screen there are further golden arrows. I can click on them, drill down again to yet another level of detail. So I've drilled down into this particular customer's account balance. I can see outstanding invoices that go into an aging report, that kind of detail. Okay. So you'll find that these arrows are all over Business One. That's quite a normal feature to find. In just about any screen you'll have a drill down into some kind of these master records or other types of detail. So I put on the sales order and I'm going to very quickly deliver it. And then I'm going to, let's see. Okay. Quickly deliver it, bring the delivery back, and invoice it. Now, there are other ways to do this. You can do it in bulk and so on, but I'm just showing you a very simple view. If I go back to the sales order, there's my sales order. It's now closed because the order's been fulfilled. If I can right-click on the body, I can choose this option here, which says Relationship Map, and it will show me, there's the three transactions that we just created. You can see they're linked in this kind of diagram. There's the sales order, the delivery note, and the invoice. And if you kind of hover over this, you can see different details about them. Obviously, this could get much more complex. You might have multiple deliveries from the same sales order and so on, but the relationship map will still show you all this kind of level of detail. And it's possible if you just double click on any of these boxes, you can open up the transaction behind it. Okay, so sales order, that's a very simplified version. Sales order processing can obviously be a lot more complex than that, but you can see how simple it can be. Now, before we go on to looking more at the stock and production side, just to mention in passing a couple of things about the system setup that it might have occurred to you. That's authorizations and, if you like, the user's interface, the user's view of the screens that you're seeing. So first of all, authorizations. Now, it might have occurred to you, for example, when I drilled into the customer and then I drilled into the account balance. You maybe don't want everyone to be able to do that. That would be quite normal. So Business One has what's called authorizations. And there's a screen where the authorizations are defined. These are users down the left-hand side. You can pick a user and you can set different levels of authorizations. You say this user's, for example, this user Mike, who doesn't appear to actually have very much he is allowed to do, but for example, there's Mike, he's not allowed to look at the financial modules. Or you could go into, say, the production side. And there's the bill of materials. We've drilled it down here to a lower level of detail. We're going to look at a specific function, say bill of materials, and we could say that Mike is allowed to read bills of materials, but he can't update them. So that's the sort of thing you might want to do in your production system. That would be quite normal. You'll have a lot of staff who are not allowed to update bills of materials, but need to be able to read them. In conjunction with all these, I know it looks quite complex, but there are easy ways of setting these up. So, for example, you can set up groups of authorizations. So you set up common authorizations, say, for the production floor or your purchasing department or whatever, and then it's just a matter of assigning users to the right group. There's a slightly more advanced version, not version, but there's a slightly more advanced feature if you need to go beyond that at the data level. We're not going to go into it, but it is possible to introduce a concept of data ownership. So where you would do that would be, for example, if you had several branches and the sales orders, for example, in one branch were not to be visible to users in a second branch. That's the kind of area where you would use data ownerships. And of course, what you're seeing there on the left-hand side in these menu modules are all the different modules that are provided in Business One. Typically, though, you would cut these menus down, and as presented to an individual user, and there's a fast way of doing that from the authorizations. You can actually just apply the authorizations to the menus. So you're seeing everything there, but that wouldn't be the norm. So that's the authorizations and the kind of the menu interface. There's a second area where you can control things, which is in terms of, if you like, the user's experience of the system, what the user sees on the screen. So I've gone back into the sales order window and I've said, let's say you've got this grid here. This is able to be amended by a feature called form settings. If I pick up the form settings, what I'm going to do is activate an extra field. I'm going to activate the business partner catalog number. So activate that. You'll see it's appeared in a particular position in the grid. You can manipulate that. You can drag fields left and right. You could, make them invisible and so on. But you get the idea. I'm just trying to give a very simple example. And if I then, once I've activated that field, I'm able to do things like enter that customer's own product code for my product code. You can see there, so I've activated that field now, and I entered the customer's product code instead of my product code. Now that's a kind of very simplistic level of manipulating the screens. There is a much more advanced version where you can go in and you can make, it's called the UI, the user interface editor, and you can use it to do sort of large-scale changes to the screen. For instance, hiding a tab or moving a field from one tab onto the main body would be kind of two examples. In other words, you can create a view of the screen to some extent that's tailored to a specific user. So users who don't need to see, for example, you'll see there the accounting tab, you can hide that tab from them. Okay, so that's just a couple of system setup features that I just thought I would mention in passing. Now, what we'll do now is move on to the main area of the presentation, which is stock and production. So first of all, we'll look at stock and purchasing. And if we go into, there's the stock management module, you can see there item master data, which we drilled down into. There's some other things in here which we won't go into in detail, but it's what I've just put it onto the screen so you can see the sort of things that are available. But jumping to the purchasing side, what I'm going to do is, just in a similar way to how I created a sales order, I'm going to create a purchase order, and I'll stick to the same product. Okay, I'm just going to purchase, let's say 5 of them. Okay, I added a purchase order. I'm just using these arrow keys, which you might notice to bring back the record I've just created, and I'm going to create a goods receipt. Again, a parallel to what you saw on the sales side of things, where I created a sales order, I delivered the product from the sales order, and I invoiced the delivery. Here, I've created a purchase order, and I'm going to perform a goods receipt. Okay, so again, it's very, very simple. If I go back to the purchase order, you can see just like the sales order, purchase order is now closed. We've got this relationship map, and there's the purchase order, there's the goods receipt. However, if we turn to some of the more interesting parts in terms of the stock system, what have we just done? So we've bought 5 of this particular type of printer, this JB Office print. So what's happened when we bought that, the stock system has been updated. So there's a stock quantity maintained of that particular product. It's been increased by 5 as a result of bringing that stock in. We've also, in fact, although I kind of hid it from you in the sales side of things, there are multiple warehouses in this system. So we happen to be working within Warehouse 1. And an option for warehouses is, if you want, it's not compulsory, it's completely optional, warehouse by warehouse, you can have bin locations. In other words, warehouse location control. And we'll see here that what's happened behind the scenes is that the stock has been posted not just to a particular, we haven't just increased the stock quantity. What we've actually done is we've located the stock in a particular stock location in the warehouse. Okay, so that's kind of the first aspect of stock control. We have bin locations, we have warehouses, and Business One, though, is also an integrated stock system. In other words, when I say integrated, what I mean is, as you buy stock, the general ledger is updated with the value of the stock. You're maintaining your ledgers in line with the movements of your stock. So in this particular case, if we look at the accounting tab, we can actually drill down into the consequence, if you like, the posting that was made to the general ledger, and we'll see in this case the value of raw materials in your company has increased by £500. Okay. So that was straightforward purchasing. If we just drill back into the item master, what I want to do is just look at another couple of the features that you can get in items. I very quickly, without really saying much about it, went into an item master, drilled into the stock tab, and looked at the stock quantity. So here we are, this is the quantity of this product, this particular printer, in stock at this warehouse. And you'll see on this warehouse we've got another drill down. It's pointing at bin locations. That's indicating there are bin locations in this warehouse. Likewise in warehouse 2, warehouse 1 and 2, you can see there are bin locations. Warehouse 3 to 5 and the ones further down, there are no bin locations. In other words, bin locations have been activated in this warehouse, but not these warehouses. So you can see it's optional. It's up to you whether you use it or not. Some of the other things we'll look at in a second. We will have a look at, here's the planning data. Now we're going to look at MRP shortly. This is where the MRP settings are held. So we can see in this particular case, this product is controlled by MRP and it's a bought item. So we'll see the consequence of that in a second. Just one other feature I'll mention as well. We see here it is possible to manage items by serial numbers or batches. The easiest way to see that in action is if you imagine, let's say a customer calls you up and says, those products you sent me last week were faulty. And what you want to do is to track down the cause of the problem. You want to see where which products did you send, where did they come from. So if we look at that in terms of what we're looking at is batch traceability here. If we go into the sales order, we'll pick it up and let's say the customer says, okay, well I ordered it under my purchase order 1234 and you sent it last week, so there we are, I found the sales order. I can use this relationship map and find the delivery. There might well be multiple deliveries, but you can get the history of deliveries. If we go into the delivery, what I'm then going to do, because what we're interested in is the batch numbers, I'll click on that batch number report, and we'll see here for this particular product, there's the batch we sent. It's got a note of the batch number. If I then select this option down here, display all transactions for selected batches, I can get, as it says, a complete history of the transactions for that batch, and most importantly the first one, which is in fact the purchase delivery. So there is where those products originally arrived in the company. So you've got this batch traceability. Okay, what we'll do now is let's move on to production. There's a production module. So first of all, we'll look at bill of materials. So if I just, let me find a bill, and there's a bill of materials. So we can see this particular product, again, it's some kind of printer. It's made up of the components. There's the quantities of the components required, the warehouse where you'd expect them to be taken from, and the issue method. Now, if anyone's not familiar with issue methods, there's essentially two ways of doing it. You can either manually issue stock to a production order when you manufacture something from the bill, or you can backflush it. Backflush just means that the system will automatically remove the stock. So this is where you define a bill of materials. The point of the bill would be to produce a production order. So I'm going to produce a production order. I'm going to create a production order for, let's say, 5 of this particular type of printer. Okay, so I've added a production order, and I'll release the production order. And just to show you the simplicity, I'll report completion. So, the system's defaulted. I've said I'm planning to make 5. It's defaulting the quantity of 5. That's what so the system's saying it expects 5 to be completed. I'll just accept that. I'll just add that. Okay. And if I go back to my production order, we'll see here that we've got a planned quantity of 5, and now it's saying there's a completed quantity of 5. I've recorded the completion of 5 units of that printer, and you'll see in this part here where there's drill downs that this is costing information. These are links to transactions and costing information. If you imagine the components, they've been, because I've set that to backflush, they've been automatically removed from stock to fulfill this order. So you can see, again, very, very simple to use. Now, if I'll just show you some other options with production orders. What I'm doing here is I've started to enter a new type of production order just to look at some of the other options. What we looked at there was a standard production order. You've got a bill, in other words, you're manufacturing something from a predefined bill of materials. Okay, when you enter the production order, you're quite free to change the bill for that particular production order. But effectively, the bill of materials is copied into the production order as a starting point. There are 2 other options which you can see there. Second one is special, and that means a production order which doesn't reference a standard bill of materials. Or if you want to put it a bit more loosely, you could say you could make anything out of anything if you want to be kind of oversimplistic about it. You might use this sort of a special production order for, say, a situation where you're changing the configuration of a product. Imagine you've got say some kind of washing machine, and you're changing the power, something like that, where you're changing the power supply. So what you're taking is a finished unit, removing the power supply and replacing it with a new power supply. So that's where you might use a special production order. And the third option is a disassembly, and it does pretty much what it says. In other words, if you instead of assembling something, you're taking the finished product and splitting it apart to create component products. Okay, so those are production orders from the point of view simply of materials. Now, there's another aspect of production, and that's what other resources other than materials that you use to put things together to build finished products. And we'll see that Business One has got a resources module. And if I open up a resource, now these resources can be machines or individual machines or groups of machines or people. It's any kind of resource other than materials. And we'll see we can define costs for it. If it's machines, for example, we can link it to the fixed assets module. So you could define a machine as a fixed asset and have it depreciated with all the relevant postings going through your ledgers. From the production side, more to the point, we've got capacity data. There is the ability to do some kind of loading from these resource definitions. So here we are. We can see that we can set up predefine a capacity, and this particular case you can create it with multiple factors, which this is where you would say, for example, this is a machine group, and you might say that one machine has an 8-hour capacity, but there's actually 5 machines, and you could put in a 5 there, and that would do all the multiplying out for you. The important point is you basically define a capacity for the machine. Now we're not going to go into this in too much detail. You are free to override that on individual days and so on, but for the moment we'll just keep it at a fairly simple level. If I refresh this, this is a resource capacity screen. It would show you some kind of information on it. So we're looking at capacity per day for this particular machine group. So we'll see at the moment we can get today there's 8 hours capacity on this particular set of machines. So that's the resource definition. Actually using the resource, it's very, very similar to using a material component. So if we start adding the same production, if we look at the production order we were working with before, there's the materials. I'm changing the production order. Of course, you might well change the BOM instead, the BOM definition, but I'll pick up a resource and I could say, yeah, we need 2 of them, something like that. You'll see it's pretty much treated just much the same way as a resource. I'll backflush it again. Just forgot the date. There we are. So I've added a new production order for this particular resource. And if we go back into the resources, we can see now that you can see the information has changed, that there is actually some kind of loading here. I don't know how clear it is on the screen, but this is where my arrow is pointing just now, is like a little raised box, and if I double click it, I can see what makes up the particular loading on that day. There's that production order that I've just put on to that particular resource today. Okay, so that's a very quick look at resources being used in the production of Business One. So finally, in this very quick look at the features of Business One, I'm going to look at MRP. I'd imagine most of you probably know what MRP is, even if you don't need to run it yourself, but in case anyone doesn't, it's Materials Requirements Planning. In other words, inventory planning, including purchasing and production, in terms of comparing demand to supply over time. So, for example, if you make washing machines and you've got a big delivery in August, and you're looking at your material requirements for fulfilling that particular delivery, what purchase orders do you have to raise and when, depending on supplier lead times? What production orders do you have to raise and when? So what you would use is MRP, which would run through the supply and demand, and at the end issue you with a series of recommendations for you to action. So if we have a look at that, here's the MRP module. And you'll see it's a very short module. There's not many options. There are only 3 options in the MRP module. The first one is forecasts, because you can feed forecasts into the MRP for calculations. So this is where you would define or manipulate forecasts or import forecasts. But what we'll stick with is the wizard itself and the outcome. So this is the wizard. It looks a bit complex, but there's kind of 2 points to note. One is you tend to run with the same settings. It remembers your settings, so you tend to have it set up to the right settings. You don't need to think about it once you've got it in use. And the second is it uses this idea of scenarios, where if I just click through it, you define a scenario, and I've just selected one, and you'll see there are various things set. We'll look at these in a second. What I'm going to do is set up an example that will drive this, which will maybe make it clearer. But because you have these scenarios, you can keep scenarios like weekly, MRP run, whatever, and all you'd be changing are the dates that you're running the MRP for. Okay, so what I said was that I'll set up an example and drive MRP. So again, this time I'm going to put on a sales order. And I'm going to put it on for, for 10 widgets, and for delivery, let's see, there we are, 1st of July, next Friday. If I had that on, I'll put some value on it. Okay, so there's our order for widgets. We can look at the stock position available to promise, but what we're going to discover is there are none in stock. Okay. And if we look at this widget, we can see it's made up of a component, a subcomponent, and another component. Okay, 2 components for this. So we have a sales order, a demand, and we've got no stock of the product. So what we'll do is we will run MRP and see what MRP recommends we do about it. So if I start today, and I'm going to go to, say, the 10th of July. So I've chosen a particular planning scenario, planning window. So from today to the 10th of July. I'm just going to keep all items selected. This rather complex looking screen has a lot of warehouses, and it's got check boxes to say, do you consider stock from those warehouses? Do you consider demand? Do you include supply? That's only there to allow you to do things like run MRP separately for, say, your warehouse in Manchester as opposed to your warehouse in Birmingham. That's the kind of idea. But again, typically it's going to remember what you did. You don't really need to select anything each particular time you do it. Again, this is another one where you've got a lot of selections, but typically you're going to use the same ones over and over again. We're choosing here with these check boxes what kind of demand is considered. So, okay, purchase orders, sales orders, are one kind of things, production orders, but you can also include things like sales quotations and stock transfers. There are various options, and you can see from the boxes on the right, you can restrict. There are ways of saying only do this for these particular sales orders or these particular purchase orders. But what I'll do is I'll just run MRP, and we can see the results there. So this is telling us something about the two widgets. That's the product we're going to sell. That's the product that one of the subcomponents. Now I happen to choose something where there was plenty of the other subcomponent. So we're looking at the results. If I, again, you maybe don't know if you can see it, but these boxes are kind of slightly raised up. You can double click them, so you can click them, and it will tell you something about where that number comes from. So this is saying what we've got here is a recommendation to create a production order of the finished component. We've also got a recommendation, here we are, to create a purchase order for the subcomponent. Now you can imagine this would get, in a real scenario, this would get a lot more complex, but what we'll do is, there's the recommendations again, just on their own, and what I'm going to do is save the recommendations. Okay, I've finished with MRP. If I now go into the order recommendation option, I can pick up the I can pick up the recommendations I've just created. There they are. I can invest there. I think if I scroll to the right, then you can see a little bit more detail. You can see there what I've got is there's the recommendations. I create a particular purchase order, particular production order. You're able to investigate these, but more importantly, you can very quickly action them. There's the ability to update them. So say you didn't want to buy 20, you wanted to buy 100. You could change it at this point, but more to the point, if I just click update, I'll create a purchase order. You can see there, it's told me a purchase order has been created, and that option's now vanished from the recommendations. So the idea being you can very quickly examine and action the recommendations from the output of MRP. Okay, so I know that's been very quick. We've looked at a number of the Business One modules: sales, purchasing, albeit briefly, stock, resources, production, MRP, and we looked at how they interacted and integrate with each other. So I hope that gives you some kind of idea of how Business One is used to control stock and production. And I'll hand back to Ian now.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Douglas. As Douglas mentioned, today was given a very brief and basic overview of the solution and the tools included in the software. We would obviously be happy to give you a more in-depth one-to-one kind of demonstration if that's something that you would be happy to do so or be interested in doing. You can contact us. Feel free to send us an email at info@milnerbrowne.com. We've got various case studies, blogs, white papers on our website, which is found at www.milnerbrowne.com. And you can see customer testimonials from lots of our other manufacturing customers and find out the kind of benefits that we've helped them with and the the targets that they've helped reach by using SAP Business One. As I mentioned at the start of the presentation, we are welcoming questions around the software. You should see a tab on the right hand side. So if you'd like to just send any questions through, I'm sure that Douglas would be more than happy to answer those and to run through those. I have got a couple here, Douglas, if you could just run through these. Now, I know this might not be an easy question to answer. What's the typical implementation period for SAP Business One?
Yes, it is a question get asked, and of course the true answer is kind of how long's a piece of string, but you know you can give some guidance to it. I would say it can be done very quickly, but I would say typically it would be unusual to see it done in under 3 months. That's usually, though, one of the biggest constraints is not how long it takes us to put it in, if you like, us Milner Browne. It's how much time you personally, the customer, can devote to the project, because obviously in terms of your own staff, they're trying to do two things. They're trying to keep the business running, do their everyday day job, and at the same time implement a brand new system with all the different aspects of that, which is, you know, the technical setup, simply learning how to use the software, and usually migrating your existing system onto Business One. So yeah, I mean, if you want a ballpark for something out the box type system, yeah, I think 3 months would be a reasonable time scale.
Okay, and what would be the typical stages of an implementation project, Douglas?
Typically, it would start off with what you would call a discovery session. We would call it a scoping session. Discover your requirements analysis. Out of that would come a scope document, which is in effect, you could regard it as a blueprint document for the system. Now, depending on the complexity of the project, you then might follow that with some workshops. In other words, examining potential solutions. But the objective is, at the end of it, you have some kind of agreed blueprint for how the system would be put together. There would then be a kind of build stage where the system is set up in the way that it should be. A testing stage, or if you like, a preparation stage prior to going live, where generally there's two things happening: that user acceptance testing and end user training, and then finally a go live stage as well. I mean, if anyone's interested, we do have documentation of our methodology, but broadly that's how it comes together.
Excellent. Okay. Another question here. Is SAP Business One limited to a certain number of users?
No. SAP's formal position is that no, there's actually no limit. And I think technically, if you look at either the SQL database or the HANA database, which we typically used, no, there's no, well, the simple answer is there is no formal limit. There's no stated limit by SAP. So I think you could quite easily get numbers up in the hundreds. I don't think there'll be plenty of examples of people of that kind of level.
Sure, excellent. Okay. If you do have any more questions, feel free to send them through. We've got about 9 minutes left of the webinar and of Douglas's time this afternoon. One more question here. Is information all saved in real time? And how is this information or the data backed up?
Okay, well, it's certainly saved in real time, or at least in the interface that we're looking at here, it's saved in real time. Backing up, it depends what you mean by backup. You're probably not so much talking about Business One itself there as the underlying technology. Now, there's two database technologies available for Business One. One is SQL Server, the other is HANA. HANA is an in-memory server, an in-memory database. So to some extent, there's backing up going on all the time in the sense that the in-memory database is also, I think there's a degree of replication on a hard drive as well. In SQL Server, it is possible to have the database is set up to maintain log files as you go along, and these log files are automatically created. But if you want to take it a stage further, it is possible to have backup servers, failover servers, that sort of thing. But strictly, that's not really anything to do with Business One itself. It's more to do with the underlying database technologies.
Excellent. Okay, we do have two more questions here, although they're kind of along the same sort of lines. I'll read out both of those if that's okay, Douglas.
Yes.
I mean, it might be that there's two completely different answers. We'll see. Is the system able to auto-generate purchase orders to replenish stock? And the second question is, does the system send automated alerts when stock is low?
The easy answer to both is yes. If you look at that, when we talk about the automatic purchase ordering, what you would do is you would use that MRP function, which we had a very brief look at. Now, I know I drove my MRP example from a sales order, but it's quite possible to set the system up to say that, to define minimum stock quantities or maximum stock quantities and reorder stock quantities, all that kind of thing. So it's stock related, and to have MRP suggest purchase orders based on stock going below whatever criteria, or at least reaching whatever trigger points you deem the stock system's going to use to issue new purchase orders. So that's the kind of the purchase order side of things. The second question was to do with alerts. Can you get alerts based on stock going below a particular point? Again, Business One has an alert feature. If the screen's still visible, I wouldn't do it, but I'll just point out where it is. And where's it gone? There it is, alerts management. There we are. So that feature there allows you to define alerts, one of which could be the stock going below a minimum quantity, and as a consequence it'll fire out either internal messages or emails or text messages if you really want. But yes, simple answer is yes, you can get alerts for stock going below a minimum quantity.
Excellent. Okay. Well, there doesn't seem to be any more questions which have been sent in, Douglas. So I think that might kind of wrap up the end of our presentation today. Thank you very much for your time today, Douglas. Very helpful and informative overview of the solution. Like we mentioned earlier on, and like Douglas touched upon, obviously that was only a very basic demonstration of the solution and the software. We would be more than happy to give you a more in-depth kind of one-to-one demonstration where we can obviously come to your premises, show you how the solution would work with your own data. We can do that. Or, like I said earlier, if you'd like to visit our website, milnerbrowne.com, you can find out more about HANA, the database that Douglas mentioned about. You can find out about B1 apps as well, which are a series of modules that Milner Browne has developed. These plug into SAP Business One. They work in conjunction with the software, and they provide just some more additional tools that's kind of areas that SAP Business One doesn't necessarily include a standard. And like I say, we've got a dedicated section, for all of our case studies and our customer testimonials. Douglas, thanks again for your time this afternoon, and we'll end the presentation there. And I hope you have a good day and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you very much.